is for girl. For the purposes of the audio version, I'm going to cut this post down a little bit. If you want to read the entire thing, I've included the link down below. The following post was inspired by an incident of poster mutilation that I ran across one day about 2 years ago, and I'm leaving the description of that in the written article if you're interested. In summary, having noticed that females are most often the targets of poster vandalism than are males, my next question was, are women more often targeted than girls? In the original article, I also promised that I wouldn't break out into song with Madonna's What It Feels Like for a Girl, but I found a great cover of the song by relatively unknown British singer Georgia, and decided to open this recording with a clip of the song's chorus. I've linked to Georgia's media page below. As an aside, if you like Kate Bush, she's one of my favorite singers, Georgia does a nice version of Running Up That Hill. Anyhow, I don't find Madonna's song particularly intelligent. I think I called it super dumb in my post. And I have very mixed feelings about Madonna herself, as she seems to do more harm than good to the feminist cause by capitalizing immensely off of peddling sexy slutdom to impressionable young girls. From birth, for the last few decades, girls have been bombarded by 1. Mixed messages from adult women about womanhood, 2. Grooming for enthusiastic sexual servitude by adult women, and 3. Evidence of the complete inability of adult women to understand the actual and more serious root, aka male domination, of whatever minor oppression they complain about when not actively engaged in sucking a dick. And to make things much worse, these influential, ignorant, and mind-fucking adult women are first and foremost the very mothers of these little girls. Confusion or what? This is what it feels like for a girl, at least in Western cultures. No wonder there are so many bloody identity and confidence problems here. We're all supposed to grow up to be honorable, sexual, innocent, slutty, compassionate, fierce, subservient, empowered, sexy bitches. Don't forget the bitches. What an incongruent mix of incomprehensible archetypal bullshit. Welcome to being a girl in the Wild West. Anyhow, before I dive in a more organized way, I'll just say that I considered other G words for this post, including G is for gaslighting, one of the most important tools in a narcissist toolbox, and something all females experience. G-spot, well, it's not the 1990s anymore, so do we really need to talk about this ever again? Gang rape, grief, gynocentrism, which I consider to be real feminism, and of course it is much criticized. God, goddess. Why is replacing an imaginary male with an imaginary female an improvement, by the way? Please join reality, ladies. Please. And grooming, which I'll talk about in this post. And of course the G word that I wish I could garrote, then swing at with a machete, and then hack at with an axe, and then finally shoot in the face 10,000 times just to make sure it's dead. G is for gender. Some might have thought I would have chosen that one to focus on. It's extraordinarily relevant to female slavery after all. But I've commented on it a lot in the past, especially those dealing with the trans cult. All that needs to be said is this. Gender is a social construct designed to force females into the inferiority box and keep males running the show violently and with impunity. Biological sex is an immutable fact, and there are only 2 of them, contrary to the delusions of the psychotic, like trannies, and liberal child abusers. These are non-negotiable terms with long-established real meanings, and trying to reverse their meanings, which has been hugely successful, evidence that trannyism is an anti-woman movement, just smacks of a complete lack of intelligence and is embarrassingly and unacceptably anti-science in this day and age. Anyhow, today G is for girl. I'm going to be very careful here not to delve too deeply into mothers and motherhood or the process of brainwashing and grooming, because the former is going to be my M word in this series, and the latter is going to be the subject of an upcoming separate series, and, to me, a fascinating subject. But I'll touch on them because they are both crucial in completely breaking down and then reconstructing girls into the scary robot monsters that 99% of adult women are today. As a disclaimer, I'm a partially black-pilled feminist type, and while I do believe males and females are born with different stuff that makes it easier for one to violently dominate and get away with his behavior, and the other to be dominated and to accept her fate relatively unchallenged, I also believe that sociological and psychological processes play a significant role in making sure things don't change on a systematic level. They are interdependent, but unlike adherents of either a camp, I believe that women can escape aspects of their biology and all of their socialization. You seldom see it happen, though, because it will be an uphill battle with no support, but it is possible. Okay, let's dive in. Keep in mind that I'm writing from a Canadian perspective, so in your part of the world you may see differences. But the thing that is similar for girls around the world is that they are treated as less than boys everywhere, and will be brainwashed to remain and accept being less in preparation for adulthood. Let's get real, so-called activists. There is no segment of the population anywhere in the world more vulnerable, abused, neglected, unprotected, and unadvocated for than girls. And by girls, Christ, I shouldn't have to define this, but I realize science or logic or critical thinking aren't cool or hip these days. I mean XX chromosomed, aka female, humans under the age of 18. Not sissy boys who like wearing nail polish and masturbating while trying on their mother's clothes. Not grown-ass men with mental health and sexual perversion and violence problems. Not even females 18 years of age or over. I don't care about people's self-developed or enforced identities that contradict biological facts. Thinking you're a donkey doesn't turn you into a donkey, although you may make a credible ass, if you catch my drift. Born to submit and whore. Girls have things stacked against them even before they are born. If you think about sex-selective abortion, a female is more likely to be scraped or sucked out than a male. And note here that I'm not lamenting that abortion occurs. I'm an antinatalist. I just have a problem with the incomprehensible belief that males have more value than females. But I guess if you like weapons... If you look at Wikipedia, they say abortion is most common where male children are valued over female children. Okay, I laughed a bit. This clearly was written by a male or cock proxy. There is no place on earth where male children aren't valued over female children. So let's reword Scrotalpedia's error. It's most common where either a one-child policy exists or where the resources available to maintain familial dependence are severely limited. Because let's face it, if any advanced or rich country suddenly had a one-child policy forced upon it, guess what would happen? Exactly. Female fetus abortion and female infanticide would suddenly be a thing. The sexualization and genderization of females also begins before birth. First off, no matter how open-minded parents think they are, I guarantee you that almost all parents have expectations that their girl child will grow up to be a nice little heterosexual breeding machine. She'll go to school, meet a boy, get married, maybe have a job that doesn't upstage the husband, and will have babies. Most parents will have no problem with the idea that their daughter's career will be put aside, maybe permanently. She'll also take care of her parents when they get old. And there will be some variations on the theme depending on where the girl grows up, whether religion is present in the house, and how traditional the family is. But no matter how free thinking, no parents envision a life for their daughter separate from males, and they certainly don't wish for lesbianism or a child free life. Parents who know they are having a girl child will often decorate baby rooms with cutesy shit and pink everything, or whatever color that represents femininity and softness and sweetness in their culture. And they'll fantasize about all the little dresses and bullshit they'll put their sweet little girl in. After birth, all people will say is how beautiful the baby girl is. Boys will be allowed other compliments and predictions about their future success. But hey, guess what? All babies, male and female, look pretty much the same for the first couple of years. Guess why they color code the clothing? So they can tell which ones are girls and treat them accordingly as future fuckholes. And will start planning their cutesy little girl life with a focus on fashion and appropriate, i.e., feminine, extracurricular activities. All the toys will involve dolls and fashion and maybe cooking, cleaning, caretaking activities, regardless of what natural proclivities or talents the young girl shows. A few parents might consider gender neutral toys, but by and large, there is still always a massive amount of unconscious parental grooming and socializing of the girl. She also almost always has heterosexual parents who model male domination styles, even if they don't think they're doing so. There is no such thing as an equal heterosexual partnership, so the messaging that is sent to girl children in 1,001 ways is that mother does X and father does Y, with X always being the shit end of the stick. As I've said before, I plan to talk about hetero-female brainwashing in a separate series, so I won't get into all the psychological mindfuckery parents inflict upon their daughters here. Suffice it to say that almost all parents successfully prepare their daughters to be future, unquestioning, pliant victims of men and male-dominated society. And the sad thing is that under the child ownership, family unit model of raising children, many girls grow up with emotional, psychological, physical, and sexual abuse, and this is much more prevalent for girls than boys. And they have no way of either reporting it or escaping it. School, teachers, and other people's monsters. Parents get a good start on destroying their girls, but then the latter have to enter society in the form of school. And it is here where even girls with a relatively good start, family-wise, really get broken down. At the age of 12 in Canada, only a third of girls say they have self-confidence, and suicide is the third most common cause of death. By the age of 15 to 16, the percentage of self-confident girls drops to 14%, and suicide is the second leading cause of death. School-aged girls in Canada are 3 times as likely to be medicated for depression and related issues than boys, are hospitalized more than boys for mental health reasons, are self-harming in unseen-before numbers, and are twice as likely as boys to be cyberbullied. Sexual assaults of girls are common, but the numbers are hard to get a grasp on. Girls are not taught about sexual assault or harassment either at home or at school as a rule. They are also not believed if they're brave enough to report inappropriate behaviors or full-on assaults. Girls are frequently punished for fighting back against boys who attack them, especially if they trounce the predator in question, and especially if a boy mom gets involved in what will end up being a career of defending her son's future rape and assault charges. And the social repercussions of reporting can be devastating, as females are almost always blamed for what men and boys do to them. So it's a no-win situation. Basically, they are fucked no matter what happens. They are punished first through the assault itself, regardless of whether anyone finds out. Then, if it becomes known, they are punished for supposedly causing the assault. They are punished for fighting back, especially if they win. And they are punished for daring to cause a fuss. I strongly suspect that as trannies are embraced more in schools and trannyism becomes part of the liberal education curriculum, sexual assaults by girls by trans girls, aka boys, will skyrocket. The interesting thing is that despite the constant violence and intimidation of girls, they still do better academically than boys. I am a long-time educator in multiple countries, and I've written about male student inadequacy before. The thing that bites here is that despite girls' clear superiority, their childhood brainwashing, the continuous violence and intimidation they experience in school, and the universal societal hatred of females that manifests on every level of the system, ensures that female competence won't pay off. Females won't fight it, and that incompetent males will always be undeservedly rewarded and supported by everyone. Myself, I remember being beat up by a group of boys for the first time when I was 5. My first sexual assault by a boy occurred when I was 6, and then it is a blur of being punched in the stomach, punched in the pudendum, punched in the tit, and countless other violations by boy students over the years. We're always told that when boys do these things, it means that they like us. So we learn early on that being female and being loved are about suffering and violence. If you don't accept it, there's something wrong with you, and you're going to end up unwanted and alone. If you were abused at home as a girl, this is an additional threat, as love was always conditional upon you accepting the abuse there too. And if you got loved, it was always accompanied by suffering. I had at least 2 male pedophile teachers. My grade 6 teacher, when I was 11, was very touchy with me and other girl students. And there were endless sexual comments, bra snapping, prejudice, and more throughout years of public school. Not once did I ever say anything to anyone. Not about the male students, not about the teachers. So how can we estimate the prevalence of the breaking down of girl students through sex-specific violence and intimidation when even an above-average student won't speak up? We know early on that we are in no way protected. Home isn't always safe, school is seldom safe, and once you hit adulthood, you are fully groomed for large-scale systemic woman hatred. Oh, and as an aside, girls' friendships don't do much to help protect against systemic childhood misogyny. See my post on friendship for more on what girls can expect from one another. Girls and sexual abuse. Much more attention is paid to the sexual abuse of boy children, despite the fact that many more girls are sexually abused. And this is contrary to what boy advocates would tell you, i.e., that girls get all the press. Why might this be? Well, my theory is pretty simple. Boys are not defined by their sexual attributes, while girls are only defined by their sexual attributes. Parents and societies do not build a boy's identity on his sexual attractiveness. His success will never be dependent upon his physical looks. He is allowed to be smart and talented and good at sports and strong and social and a host of other things that are allowed to full humans. Girls from birth are defined by how they look, and it increases as their bodies develop. By the early teen years, it is apparent, in Western culture at least, that a girl is 3 fuckholes and a pair of tits. And every girl knows this on some level. If she has an attractive face, all the better. But even a butter face, which is gross slang, meaning that everything about a girl is attractive, but her face, has some value as a fuck object only. So a girl is seen as little more than a sexual plaything for males. But, as I said, boys are human. If we pay too much attention to assaults against girls, then somehow boys will lose. And besides, we have to keep grooming little girls for what they will be required to accept in teen dating and adulthood dating and marriage. If you get girls to accept sexual assault as normal, they will make the perfect heterosexual adult women. Pedophiles. Most pedophiles are, of course, male. And of course, there is a movement, like there always is when male violence and depravity have a spotlight briefly shone on them, to try to prove that there is a larger-than-life female pedo population. I call bullshit. I have never once seen a female teacher speak or behave sexually inappropriately with a child, except on TV. but I've witnessed and experienced tons of male teachers do so. I've never, ever once met, overheard, or read anywhere a woman waxing on about sexy little boys or even teenaged boys they want to screw. But I've heard it and read it literally thousands and thousands of times by men talking about wanting to fuck, rape, mess up little girls. And there is a presence of deliberate violence in a lot of men's words. But this makes sense to me as I don't see male sexuality as separate from their violence. Having penetrative sex with women and girls is ultimately a violent act. If you read the professional literature on pedos, which I have, we hear that roughly 1% of males are true pedophiles, which is basically a preference disorder. But pedophilic fantasizing is present in approximately 5% of males. I think that is very, very conservative. And the idea that fantasizing about raping little girls and teen girls doesn't make you a pedophile is nonsense. Personally, I think if males knew for certain that they'd never, ever, ever get caught, most would rape a child, mostly girls. Probably a few boys would figure in the mix too. I also think that many would violate an animal, and of course most men already stick their dicks in inanimate objects on a regular basis. I've written about male sexuality before, and you can find that link on my website. Males are born wrong, become more wrong through the sociological system they construct and fight to keep, and no one does anything about it except lament that life isn't fair. Well, this isn't exactly an issue of fairness. I also wrote a post in the past considering how many female beauty rituals are just ways of keeping pedophilic male tendencies focused on adult females. Sex trafficking. The only reason we have pornography and prostitution is because males exist. I firmly believe it wouldn't exist if men and boys weren't around. If you are a het woman who is reading this and are yelling at the screen that this isn't true, not all men, I would suggest that you have been well and fully brainwashed and you need to deprogram yourself. Many women have managed to escape from the porn-watching loop that males have introduced them to, and they tend to report being unable to believe that they were ever able to watch it and pair it with love or female sexuality. Pornography, like prostitution, is dependent upon sex trafficking and forced drug addiction in females, so that they can make it through the pain, suffering, and degradation, and then somehow stumble back for more. Most victims of the sex trade are female, and almost all are forced into it as children, the average age being 12 to 14 years. They can be domestic and internationally enslaved girls. The former are often runaways that end up in terrible situations that started out on the surface looking like protection. One might find it hard to imagine how a girl can be tricked into slavery, but it is actually quite common, especially when a girl is afraid, vulnerable, desperate because of poverty, and already a victim of childhood abuse. There isn't a parent on the planet who talks to their daughters about trafficking. Remember, girls are taught to trust males, not suspect them like a feminazi would. And many of the girls who end up in the sex trade were fleeing sexual and other abuse anyways. They're primed for male protection. Just as an aside, the Internet Watch Foundation works to protect child victims of pornography. They remove 1,000 pages of child porn from the internet each and every week. And the porn never stops because of men. Never fear, though, lady porn remains because women can consent to their abuse, while children cannot. Fine line, in my opinion. A few other things to think about. I want to close this long post, but before I do, I'll mention a few other notes that are relevant to girls. First is infantilization and how it leaks into adulthood. I wrote a post on the topic before as a comment on how there is no true equivalent to emasculation for women because you can't strip power from someone if they had no power to begin with. Women as a class don't have power, so the closest you get is infantilization, which is a way to prevent women from ever having power or even feeling like they deserve to have any. The instilling of powerlessness in females starts very young, and this leaks into the next thing I want to mention, referring to adult females as girls. It is part of infantilization, and men don't experience it. This is common in the West, but I've also noticed it as a common acceptable practice in other places like China. Women refer to themselves as girls and almost never as women. Woman refers not to a regular adult woman, but as a mature, matronly type, an older person, which no woman is supposed to want. Many young women even go so far as to call themselves baby ladies or baby girls, which is this idealized, infantilized, but also desirable, sexy adult female. It is so bizarre and repulsive to me, but it is very common. I also ran into the whole girl thing when I was a young grad student in the US. I noticed a rather yucky poster one day on the wall in my department talking about girls and men, and I emailed the contact on the poster to ask them about the sexist language. I got a nasty, racist, elitist reply from a black woman, girl, who said that the poster came from her black sorority that was, she was proud to tell me, filled with wealthy, prominent black women. And this was the way they talked. So there, well, fuck me. Rich, super privileged black girls promoting sexism and expecting an economically disadvantaged, foreign with no legal rights, white female to support their leg-spreading cocksuckage. I love this world and what constitutes oppression and who is promoting it and making sure it never dies. I don't engage with racists or misogynists as a rule, so I didn't bother answering this rich American woman. My personal philosophy is to refer to adult women as women to give them the respect they deserve, instead of infantilizing them in the name of supporting male pedophilic tendencies. Conclusion. Now, like I said earlier and have said many times before, I'm an antinatalist, for many reasons actually. I have been since I was about 10 years of age. I once, as an early 20-something, had a dream that I was holding a swaddled child and realized that I was preparing a bowl of dog kibble for it. When I looked down, I had a puppy in my arms. That is my idea of having a child. I've since expanded my worldview to include cats. Anyhow, I'm an antinatalist. I have a massive amount of experience with children throughout most of my life, though, probably more than most mothers who turn their noses up at the child-free, and I would say with honesty that I've helped many. But I wouldn't say I have a general love of them. They're exhausting, and I dislike boy children immensely and find myself looking at them, wondering when they will start raping and creating problems for more than just their mothers and sisters. I'm a bit mixed about girls. I feel protective of them, generally speaking. I know they have no advocates or protectors. Their mothers are often their biggest betrayers and earliest destroyers. But many girls start showing their future brainwashed fembot monster selves, even in childhood. And although that isn't their fault that they're turning out that way, I cringe in revulsion at the child abuse that creates that sort of crafted persona. I don't like tomboys much either. Yeah, really, I don't like either end of the gender spectrum, and tomboys and adult butches don't solve anything for womanhood, in my opinion, as gender expression is constructed, not innate. But as long as they are not sexist or abusive to women, I don't really care too much. They may not solve anything, but they generally are not the problem. I do, however, have a very soft spot for quiet, intelligent girls who defy forced gender streaming altogether, and are what I would call divergent, not to be confused with the definition from Veronica Roth's book series, but the idea has some similarities. These girls aren't masculine, they aren't feminine, they're adaptable and versatile, and they're able to feel comfortable doing any number of activities, regardless of for whom they are deemed more appropriate. It's also harder for them to find their community, as they don't fit into any kind of stereotyped box. These are my girls, and if I'm lucky enough to find one, I'll do anything to support and protect them.